Welcome to Very Honored Frater BT's Esoterinerds podcast, episode 11, in which I interview Ella Jensen, Soror AJMNS of Sweden. But first, the first of a brand new segment I shall call Traditional Golden Dawn Temples. I didn't know, 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 I didn't
My name's Sean, Frater MTO.
I understand that you're with a traditional Golden Dawn temple that I didn't know about before.
I am. We call ourselves the Order of the Golden Dawn in the Outer. Our mother temple is the Temple of Thoth Amen-Ra, located in Denver, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a sanctuary in Salt Lake City, and we'll soon have a sanctuary in Colorado Springs, Colorado as well.
That's
we've
great.
been growing, and our website is coloradogoldendawn.com. We've been functioning for about 8 years.
There's a temple, it's like either called Thoth Hermes or Thoth Anubis or something like that.
Yeah, they're Collegium Spiritus Sancti.
Right. Yeah, they're good.
They're here in Denver as well. We visit their group once a year.
Oh, cool. That's great.
And go hang out with them.
Frater
Yeah.
ICL is a dear friend of mine. He's one of my, 3 teachers.
We've actually talked about trying to do a couple of joint meetings.
Oh, great.
And just bringing our two different groups and temples and orders together.
Oh, that's such great news. Yeah, tell him you know BT.
Okay. So always looking to expand my circle of friends when I see
Sure.
people's posts and stuff that I respect. So
Yeah.
there we go. Yeah, my girlfriend might be a good candidate. She's an herbalist, so
Mhm.
she's actually I don't know if we were working on a book a while back with Sam and a bunch of other people to publish a bunch of different Z rituals. And the one that I was going to work on from Julie's influence was, in the Golden Dawn we have, Z rituals for summoning and working with, all the planetary spirits and the Olympic spirits and, all of those.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taking a different tact, and we've done a lot of work in summoning and working with herbal spirits within the Golden Dawn structure.
I like the crossover into the shamanic. I love whenever I hear that that's happening, because the thing with the Golden Dawn that, it can space you out. The woman who wrote Light Bearers of Darkness, that was the temple. It was one of Zaluski, no, not Zaluski. It was one of Falcon's temples when he left for New Zealand, and he left it behind. And then World War I hit, so, it was a weird time, but they just started doing a ton of astral work, and then, they just kind of floated away. I think they got too far out. But the world, you say ground, you say, oh, feel the wood, the pine and ground. But back then the ground was shaking, like it was literally, it was World War I. So, I can see why, they went crazy, but they did go crazy. I definitely recommend checking out Light Bearers of Darkness as an example of a traditional Golden Dawn temple where everybody lost their fucking minds.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. It's not the only time it's happened. The salt of the earth and the soil of the earth is always a good thing. But taking it outside, taking the magic outside is always good, I'd say.
Yeah. So like the first spirit I worked with was the spirit of the white oak. And that was amazing, overwhelming, incredible. Just the power that some of those nature spirits have. And then she was just installed as Hierophant of our temple today.
Oh, you had your ceremony today. Congratulations.
Yeah, we had our equinox was.
Yeah, tell her
today.
Congratulations. That's great. Are you taking an office, or are you sitting as past Hierophant?
Premonstrator and past Hierophant.
Okay, cool.
She owns a metaphysical shop here in town, Ye Old Magic Shop. We specialize in herbs and poisons and stuff like that.
Nice.
And she's traditional witch, practices traditional witchcraft.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of her stuff comes from more Mexican hoodoo type lines of work.
Right. It was good to meet you.
And hey, it was great to talk to you. And
likewise. We'll talk
I'm sure
again.
We'll be in touch.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Have a good day.
From the word Ashat does thy name find its root, O thou goddess Ashira, thou consort of El Yahweh, Adonai, Baal, thou tree of life, the phoenix date palm, the nurturing Mother Earth, and Lady of the Sea, Mifletzet, the Vesica Pisces, the bright gate of glory through the darkening skies, Ashira, the sun, the vulva, the doorway whence life issued into the world, thou art the same in the groves of the ecstatic rites. Ashira, to the children of Japhet, thou art Tamar of the sky, who annually enslaved Dilis Varsklavi, master of winter, the eternal virgin who rides through the sky on a serpent saddled and bridled with gold. Ashira, the queen of heaven, to the ancient Hebrews in Egypt. And Kanayatu Elohim, Berachti Echtem Leyahoah Shomron Ulasherato. I have blessed you by Yahweh, our guardian, and his Ashira. Our guest tonight is something of a kindred spirit. Plus, she has a great British accent. Let's get to that interview, shall we? Greetings, Sora. Welcome to the Esoterinerds podcast.
Thank you, 93s.
Could you tell me a little bit about your name?
I'm Soror AJMNS. Stands for Amor Junctit Mors Non Separabilit, which is what love has drawn together, more death cannot separate.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Amor Vinci Omnia, but different.
Bit more stalkerish, perhaps. I don't know. It's like
love
funny
has
boiling
brought us
mottos.
together, and your stupid breakup idea isn't going to separate us.
Damn you!
This restraining order.
Well, it's kind of appropriate because I left. I've been inactive in the OTO for the past 10 years and so, and recently came back.
Okay.
To sort of be active in the Swedish OTO, and it's
but on your terms, no
on my terms.
Yeah.
No, I think I took a pause to let life happen. I think you have to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Just like marriage and children and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So my motto is the slightly stalkerish version of a Freemasonic old motto. And,
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm Ben Tiferet, which is simple. It's son of Tiferet.
Yeah.
When I was initiated, that name is the name I go by publicly, and that was divined for me when I was initiated into a traditional Golden Dawn temple,
cool.
the old Z formula. And I think what happened was my mom was the bigger personality, and I was the 15-year-old boy in the background at the time.
Yeah.
And so she got Ashira, ancient goddess of the Hebrews, and then her son got Son of Beauty. So,
that's really interesting because I've been reading up on Ashira on this Jewish goddess.
Oh,
it's
good.
a really interesting concept because it used to be a big dichotomy because it used to be this big pole standing in the Jewish temple that they worshipped, or they worshipped trees out, and these were the holy trees.
Right.
So from the beginning, the sort of origins, there was actually more of a tree hugging community.
I wonder if that's the origin of Yakin and Boaz, the pillars in the temple.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, I wondered. I have not thought about it like that. But yeah, now that you say it, that's really deep.
Yeah. Well, if you want to go a little deeper, there's the three lines in Exodus that they draw the Shem Hem Pharesh and the 72 names of God from talk about is the earliest mention of Yakin and Boaz, where it's the pillar of light and the pillar of cloud. And it was a light to the army of Yisrael and darkness to the army of Misraim. So whatever the heck that means. I mean, I think there's more to it than just that Moses was trying to get away from, Egypt, and so there was some kind of magic involved. It's much more about initiation, I think. There might be.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think both Moses and Aaron were sort of symbols of the initiation of the Jewish people into that specific tradition.
Right.
It's much more of a. Sorry, I get Bible nerdy.
Oh no, that's you don't have to apologize. I'm a bit Bible nerdy myself. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting, and it's one of those subjects that we try to. I don't know. There's two lines that either you're an esoteric into mysticism and stuff, and you don't like the Bible, and you think the Bible is hogwash, right. And then you go the other way, and you're like, actually, this book is full of amazing stuff.
Well, once you've interpreted a lot of alchemical texts, and then you revisit the Book of Revelation, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And you're
I think that's what happened with Crowley.
Yeah. Well,
this isn't what my dad told me it meant.
No.
Yeah.
This is not Mother's Sunday School. What is this? But Crowley is one of those interesting. And I actually had this chat with a sister yesterday about is the old Hermetic stuff still relevant, or has Crowley sort of taken the old Hermetic text and magic and all that Golden Dawn stuff, and maybe transcend it? And we were talking about chaos magic and how that sort of maybe fits better to Thelema than other stuff. And
right.
There's such a fuzzy line. I think.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
a really fuzzy line.
I think it depends on the individual.
Yeah.
Like if you ask someone, has Christianity rendered Judaism irrelevant? If you ask someone in a certain neighborhood in the Midwest, then they'd say, well, yes, Yeah. But if you ask, someone down on Fairfax with the curly dreadlocks and the funny hat, he'll say, get out of my face, you blasphemer, or something along those lines.
Yeah. Well, but I think Judaism is really interesting. I find it more interesting than Christianity because it carries this great... I don't know what you call it in English, like great weight to it.
What would you call it?
Pondus. Weight, strength, authority. And I think it carries a greater authority because of the social connotations we have to Judaism in Western society.
Right.
So I think we as people are more, or living in the post-Christian society, we'd probably think more of Judaism as an authoritative patriarch kind of thing.
The Magna Carta is an interesting read.
The Magna Carta?
Yeah, there's one part on the Magna Carta where it talks about how to deal with, if a citizen owes money to a Jew and he dies, then the wife is supposed to settle, and it explains that, but it doesn't mention bankers. But this was the 1200s or something like that before they were distinguishing between the two. And then between that and the Merchant of Venice, it's kind of interesting. I mean, these days it's a rude stereotype when people say, Jewish bankers. But historically, I think the two kind of went hand in hand. But there was some history where the Templars picked up on that. But I think what it was really was that when Europe was feudal, Africa, Arabia had a checking system. They had mercantilism. They had an elaborate, sophisticated system. And so Jews from Spain coming into Europe, they'd look around and go, oh, wow, that's not going on here. Hey, everybody, here's this concept called banking. Here's how it works. Yeah. And then they end up being the banker.
And money. Yeah, and then we end up with Wall Street.
Right. Eventually.
It's such a great but it built. I mean, the Jewish and the Muslim now, their banking system built on very little interest and if any at all.
Oh, it was supposed to be. It was forbidden. It's not halal or kosher to charge interest.
No, exactly. So in some ways, I think they'd figured out the whole banking system much better than we have because they didn't make up fake money.
Right.
They didn't I've kept your money in my pocket now for about a month, and you've magically come up with 20% more.
Yeah, and then looking over at Qatar, it's like, how did this happen? It's like, well, how you guys are all driving around to work every day? Yeah, well, that's how it happened.
That's how it happened. Oh, so that's interesting. From the Bible to the Templars to financial.
Oh, yeah, it's all fully connected. Oh, and it seems like, you were talking about Judaism and Christianity. I went through a phase where I became Eastern Rite Catholic. So it was it was the Greek ceremony, but Russian style in the Roman Church. And the guy who ran it was the ecumenical director for Los Angeles and right-hand man to Mahoney. And so I got kind of involved in that, just sort of
to be one level more nerdy, ironic, hipster. Like I grew up, my dad was doing Tibetan Buddhist chants, so I grew up going, Om, and rolling my eyes back and stuff like that. So when I grew up and wanted to rebel, I became Catholic, So
I know that feeling.
yeah, but I did become Jewish at one point also. I had a Jewish stepfather. He was in episode 1. But anyhow, so it's like when Christianity came along, they included Judaism as the Cliff Notes background in the beginning, and then going one direction. Joseph Smith is like, okay, the Bible, right? Yeah, okay, and also this, and so it's.
Oh, don't get me started on Joseph Smith.
but then.
I mean, seriously, the only good thing Joseph Smith has brought to the world is all these hunky Americans that come over here to Europe and preach, and we meet them in trains and stuff, and they say hello, and you go, whew. Whew, Salt Lake City has got a thing going. I don't know if it's the, seriously, that's the only thing that for me, Mormon, and I have the Book of Mormon in my shelf. Because
me too.
I
It was
found
given to me by a door-to-door Mormon,
Yeah, and I find it so fascinating. So fascinating.
Moroni.
Because, yeah.
It sounds like our work. It's not, I go into the temple and I talk to an angel, but honestly, if I invoke the same angel and it says the same thing in exactly the same tone of voice 4 times in a row, I banish the fucking thing, because that thing, I don't know, it's like some kind of astral endless loop tape that he stumbled on there.
But that's, I found it so interesting that people buy the thing, because, people had known for ages that, like Egyptian architecture and stuff. And so it was only a matter of time when they conquered America for somebody to say, hang on, this must have something to do with each other.
Right.
He probably, got a bit of money out of that. People's superstitions and people's sort of, that totally happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
he was a Mason, so he was fully trained.
Yeah, he was fully trained.
When these guys came to my door, I blew their minds within the first few minutes, because they handed me the Book of Mormon. I turned to page 1 and I said, so how do you guys feel about the Shekinah? And he said, the what? And I said, the feminine principle, the feminine aspect of God in the Christian tradition. It was the Virgin Mary when she was 3 years old. She walked into the Holy of Holies and the Shekinah descended into the temple for the first time. And it's all in the Apocrypha. Have you guys read the Apocrypha? And they're like, no. And I was like, well, okay, so how do you guys feel about that? And they're like, well, she was a nice lady and all, but we don't really care as much about Mary. And I was like, interesting. So why did Joseph Smith choose the phrase, the presence of God, in the first line of the first page of the Book of Mormon, when
He is a Mason.
would have known that was a direct reference to the Shekinah? And they both were just staring at me. And then I think one of them actually left the church. He just kind of broke down, like, wait, if what you're saying is true, and he's like, that's legit. He was looking at the other guy like he was a Mason, like he started taking my side. And so then eventually they were like, well, we've got to go talk to our, and so they were like, we'll come back in a week. And so I said, okay, yeah, come back. And I'll bring my books out and we'll have a great talk. And so when they came back, the one guy that was starting to turn wasn't there. It was just the zealot and another guy.
Of course. Like, don't send him.
Yeah.
Send him into Bible camp or something.
And then all he had to say at that point was, did you pray to the Holy Spirit to tell you whether or not the Book of Mormon was true? And I said, honestly, no. I couldn't bring myself to, in all seriousness, actually pray to the Holy Spirit to ask if the Book of Mormon was true. And he was like, okay, well, if you did, then it would have said yes. And I'm like, okay, I think this conversation's over,
It's like, yeah. That's another interesting concept, because I've been a lot in... taken part a lot in church. I mean, like you, I had a stint in but this was in the Anglican church. Mm-hmm. What I find really interesting is that some churches have nailed Holy Spirit thing. They've really nailed it,
yeah.
and it's so interesting to see how you can stand in a huge church with like 500 people and the Holy Spirit is like vibrant in the room.
Yeah.
And then you go, hang on, this is some powerful mojo,
Yeah, totally.
I don't even think they know what's going on.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's the placebo. I mean, a non-believer could say it's placebo effect, that if you get 500 people all to believe that they somehow are directly karmically tied to this guy who was tortured to death 2,000 years ago, and then get them all into it, and they all experience the death, and then they all experience the sudden Santa Claus, resurrection together, then that's magic, and that, totally. I mean, we have similar things in our tradition too. The LVX formula, the Isis, Apophis, Osiris, and all of that.
Yeah, it's just really in your face when you walk into a church that's nailed Holy Spirit, just how close to magic it is, just how close it is to energy manipulation, etc. If we subscribe to that,
Absolutely, yeah. And then when it's so overwhelmingly absent. I'm moving back. I lived in the UK, moved back to Sweden, and started going into churches here and sitting in church and going, there is nothing. Wow.
It's empty.
Yeah.
It's just, it's nothing. And I went, oh, okay, next. It was really, and I think that was part of my reason of coming back, was that I'd found this, I found this current, and the current was the best place had been in Thelema, and working that kind of magic. Yeah, it's like, whoa, hang on. Yeah, that's where it is. It's really cool. But yeah, of course, over in Sweden we're a little bit more liberated in that way, I guess, from religion and from religious fanaticism in many ways. And I think that's why churches are boring, because there's no fanatists and they're having, having placebo effects.
Yeah, it's kind of passé.
Well, we get the big vacuum of sort of sectarian atheists on the other hand. And atheists are cool. I mean, I have complete respect for atheists because I can see that perspective as well. But when they become militant in some way, or they become sort of then you lose. If you are into like esoteric stuff, then the clue's in the name.
Right.
I
found common ground because, for example, my father-in-law is a very particularly atheist, and he and I found common ground where, basically he feels that, yes, we're all connected. It's one great energy, and the stuff that is currently him, his body, his energy, that will live on forever as long as the universe lives. And he acknowledges that, science acknowledges that, etc. But him, the structure, personality, and memories, that's all in his brain, and when he dies, that's going to decompose and eventually become dust, and therefore he is mortal. He does not have an afterlife, in his own mind. And so, and my position is, well, you'll be pleasantly surprised when I meet you in the Bardo later,
I'll meet you down and we'll have some cocktails and kick back. It'll be awesome. And we have the great musicians.
But in a way, when he confronts that directly, and I think that some people use religion or spirituality as almost a cop-out to not confront that. Like, for example, if someone's a Zen practitioner, then you kind of confront silence, for instance. Maybe not directly confronting death in particular, but that probably will come up eventually, like in a deep Vipassana meditation. Everything you can think about will come up before you get to that silence that's on the other side. And I think some atheists, maybe not just the ones that are atheists just so they can walk around talking shit about their Christian parents, and they're really still secretly Christian, but they don't want to admit it, but the deep-thinking atheists, I think, are very deeply spiritual people who've confronted the abyss, where a lot of even our kind of people, are playing around in the astral so much and talking about doing magic to manifest in Malkut that they don't ever even want to look up there, and they just sort of talk about the abyss because it's kind of hip to know a little about it. But they don't actually throw themselves into it, and
I find that really interesting as well if we talk about hipsters and all that, because a tendency that I found in our people is to become lost almost at the edge of the abyss and never really gazing into it, and never really, but they collect stuff. So they collect they can quote 777 by heart, and they know all the chapters of the Book of the Law, and the Grisha is like their best friend and stuff. And you kind of go, actually, hang on, it's not about who has most books when they die win, you know. It's about whether you achieved your journey, and I've seen a lot of that, and that kind of turned me off Hermetic traditional magic for a long time, because I was like, really, do I have to be like these guys?
Yeah, that's why I think the solo path is kind of ideal. I mean, I was actively involved in a group for almost 19 years, and then finally, left as gracefully as I could, and I've been solo since then. But I mean, and for a while I was just saying, you know what, I'm done with magic and I'm just going to focus on yoga and meditation from here on out. And then people started every now and then, they'd say, well, do you want to have a class and do some ritual work? And I'll be like, sure, I'll have a class. And then I had to like publicly say, okay, I'm not affiliated with the temple that I was initiated by. These are, and so then now I have a thing. It's called the LA Sanctuary. And it's the same thing that I've been doing. My mom established it in the 90s. And so
you get sucked in.
I get sucked in, but I'm doing it on my terms. I'll have a class, maybe quarterly, where it used to be weekly. So so that's different. And so it's a lot better. I've brought in some Japanese Buddhism. So originally it was traditional Golden Dawn. Now it's traditional Golden Dawn with like Japanese Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism very much intermingled. So I'm kind of like doing my own Crowley path.
I was just about to say that. It's like,
rather than join a Crowley order, I joined a traditional Golden Dawn order and then went into 5=6. And I did it all too young, and there were drugs involved, and then bringing in crazy new ideas and being heretical, and then eventually going on my own path and starting my own school.
The Crowley path.
The one Hubbard took.
There was drugs involved. Hubbard. Don't get me started on Hubbard.
Don't get you started on Mormons or Scientologists.
No, and you know what? It's all about these American white men trying to establish a religion on something that some crazy alien told them while they were probably stoning out or tripping their tits off on something. Yeah. I'm serious.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think it's quite telling that when Aleister Crowley is deeply concerned about your motives and your personality, you need to be worried about who you are.
That's true.
When even Crowley goes, that Hubbard guy, I don't like him. You gotta go, okay.
He didn't like Hitler either. Yeah.
No. Well, but when
but they
even
both
Crowley
liked
says,
him. They were both Crowley fans.
I know, but I love how that's hidden away, and maybe we shouldn't be talking about the big S, but I think that legacy needs to be brought up more often.
Oh yeah, in my podcast, I'm actually I'm breaking down the technical dictionary of Scientology and Dianetics word by word, but I'm encouraging people to learn the knowledge and stay away from the organization, and giving people pointers on where to get the straight information. That doesn't include the stupid sci-fi ending that he had to cap on because people were like, okay, I've learned everything you had to teach. What else is there? And he's like, fucking, there's a volcano with fucking aliens, and you're billions of years old. Fuck off,
There you go. So, it's something, but sorry. Yeah. Really, John Travolta? Really? I kind of liked Tom Cruise up until a certain point. Lost all respect.
Well, the way I look at it, I mean, probably Moses was, maybe he wasn't a white man, but, he was probably tripping when he was up on Mount Sinai. And, he didn't have he was carving on rocks, so he could only write down 10 things, where Hubbard had people taking notes. And even like Dogen, when he established Zen in Japan, had people taking notes. Mm-hmm. And so the more recent cult leaders have books and books and books like Crowley does, and then the ones further longer ago have like Hammurabi or something, or they have less written, but sometimes they make a huge splash and a huge impact, for better or for worse.
I think it's quite. I think that's interesting to see what's going to live on, because I studied Egyptology and Assyriology at university, and found it deeply, deeply interesting what actually happens when we discover these things, because
syncretization.
But we rarely reflect that the Babylonians or the Assyrians had the exact same thought patterns, and they weren't less civilized.
They had a mail system.
They had a mail system. They had a counting sheep system. You know, they had
separation of church and state. They had good drugs from out of town. They had, they had a lot of stuff that we take for granted that we got from them ultimately.
Yeah. But so I think that to invalidate their religions by saying, it's the
bad guys in the Bible, because the people next door didn't like them. If we took the Egyptians, way serious, as much as some people take seriously the Old Testament, then the Ethiopians would be the bad guys, and then we'd be hating on them,
But I think that's one of the big things you do in first year in Egyptology is actually comparing source data. So you read about the same battle in the Egyptian, Jewish, but also in the Assyriological and in the Babylonian. You read about these battles, and the Egyptians are like, those nasty Israelites. They came here and they hurt us really badly.
I know.
And then they made themselves king. And there's a whole king list in Egypt. You have this king list that's like hacked into a wall, and there's several years, centuries, that are actually erased by the Egyptians because it was such a shame that the Israelites had actually ruled their country for this time. So they completely erased it. That's for me is like, okay, so this whole slaves in Egypt thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the slaves in Egypt thing, maybe that was because the story that I heard was that the basically there's that space in between when Joseph and the Technicolor, Dreamcoat he becomes some important political figure, and all his 12 brothers kneel in front of him and they don't know who he is, and Ben Kingsley's there and everybody's having a great time. And then later, I guess there's some number of hundreds of years between that time and the time, and he's of course the Pharaoh's right-hand man because he can interpret his dreams, and then a little later you have the multitude of Hebrews, and they grew too numerous, and then there was a new Pharaoh, and he didn't like the Hebrews, and then there was a few new Pharaohs, he was the grandson of an anti-Semitic Pharaoh, and so then he started giving them hard work, and all this other stuff. But maybe in that space in between, there's a part where they ruled. I never even thought about that. But MacGregor Mathers was a big fan of the idea that it was the Hebrews that introduced the Kabbalah to the Egyptians, and then that's why the Egyptians are so cool. And then when Moses left, he took it with him, but left behind what he left behind in Egypt. But of course, where did they get all that gold and stuff, when they were making the tabernacle in the wilderness? Of course, but then that was before "Thou shalt not steal" came later. So it was probably when they were leaving, they were like, "Oh, we're probably going to need a lot of gems and gold and jewelry to build a sacred temple with later, right?"
Very rarely because they're the baddies of the Bible. Very rarely get the Babylonians. The whole eastern side of Israel and those countries was at this point in time blooming. It was
that was
exploding.
where civilization was introduced to the Jewish people.
Exactly.
And
so
that's probably where they got a bad taste in their mouth about the goddess, though, and why they got rid of Ashira.
Yeah. Well, who was such an awesome entity.
Yeah.
And I cannot read enough about it.
Yeah.
I often get lost in the whole thing. Maybe because I do, priestess work and that kind of stuff. And so you're constantly looking out for stuff that you can resonate. And I think a lot of people resonate with Babylon and that whole thing. But I get more out of the big mother goddesses that aren't warriors as well. I get, Inanna and so on and so on. Like Kali. I think Kali is probably the better, her sides are better to describe the kind of priestess role that seems relevant to me. Anyway.
Yeah, totally. I like the idea of Ashira because the idea of a goddess in Judeo-Christianity is so heretical. And it's so missing and so necessary. And the reason why there's been patriarchy in the West for all this time is, maybe not because of, but it's like correlation causation. They took the goddess out of their religion so that they could support their own patriarchy that was already there. So whether the chicken or the egg came first, they got rid of Ashira. And so the idea of bringing her back and the idea of having Jewish culture, but not male-dominated Jewish culture, like in some alternate dimension where instead of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, it was Ashira that took over and they got rid of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and it was all women running it. It's kind of a silly thing to imagine, but what if they had kept Ashira? Or what if we can bring it back? What if we can focus the lens, not make it up, but find that focus of the lens to where it all, the whole picture becomes clear and we can see the roots of that where it all separated and went out different directions and became all.
Yeah. I think one of the most subversive things is that she never went away. She turned into all these historical biblical characters. She turned into Esther. She turned, all these.
And Easter.
All these, but all these.
That was a cousin.
All these. That was a cousin.
Goddess cousin.
In a Mormon way, but she never goes away. She's constantly present throughout the Bible, and that's why we get such a hang up on Marys and Marthas and all this, is that it's already explicitly there in folk culture, folk memory, and so they latch on to the least, the smallest notion of there being any feminine. People latch onto that, and that's why the Catholic Mary is huge, not because not only because...
Well, ISIS was huge, and then they came in and said, hey, there's something even more new, and they're like, okay, who's the goddess in that one? And they were like, his mom, Mary. And then they're like, well, so we'll just use the old rites of ISIS catacomb, and we'll just have everybody do bread and wine anyway. That's cheaper than what we were doing before. And and they're in Alexandria,
Yeah. No, I think... That actually brings us really, really well into the podcast that I'm doing, the Stooping Starlight, because that was
tell
kind
us a
of
little bit about that.
We're a few women involved in Thelema and magic in general, who were like, why is there so few female voices out there? Because there are, there's not a lot of saved from like Crowley Scarlet women. There's nothing. Apart from Blavatsky, who was really Crowley in drag.
I think it's because occult orders don't have HR departments with affirmative action and all that.
I know, but it's not just that. I think it's not that, for example, the ATO is lacking in women, because there are lots of women. I think women are involved in the occult on a hermetic side, on a higher level than, say, Wicca, are generally really chilled women who don't have much to say.
Yeah.
Who are like, yeah, whatever. You blabber on, darling. I'll just sit here in the corner and do magic instead. But so I want to change that, because we've lost so much, and I think throughout history we've lost many women's voices in the Bible and other writings, Islam as well.
Yeah, what would Dina say? There's a book called The Red Tent that's speculating. It's about the question, what would Dina say? Dina being the sister of the 12 brothers that became the tribe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so we, we're missing this gap, and it would be so sad if we, in the 2nd century of the new Aeon, just blew that all away and just went, we're just going to continue as we've always done. I think women have so much to talk about anyway. We have a lot to talk about, and yeah.
So your podcast focuses on women in the occult community?
Yeah, and it's made by women only, so there's no men involved. And that's not because we don't like men. It's not. It's really not. It's because we think that there has been a lacking of a forum for women to speak uninterrupted.
Well, you saw, I posted that picture of my mom and said, okay, everybody, I made an Esoterinerds podcast, and so far I've got 9 men and 1 female. So yeah, I want to actively work to turn that around too, because I think it's just something that, okay, on one level, when you look at sparrows, and granted there's a lot of different ways that the sexes get along, but when you look at, any bird, generally the bright one that's loud is the male, and the one that blends in with the tree to, not get eaten by predators is female. Yeah. And generally when you're walking down the street, especially if it's a bad neighborhood, a man is feeling comfortable and a female is kind of looking over her shoulder because she, there's a little more risk for her. And so, there's just generally built in, there's this difference that if all things are equal, the men will be the ones that are heard. And so there has to be people that actively work toward making that change, like yourself.
Yeah.
And while I am male and I'm the only person involved in making my podcast, that's exactly what the reason, I put the word out and said, hey, I don't want, and it's not that I want to shut all the men up. I want to keep interviewing men, but moving forward on the podcast, I want it to be a little more balanced.
And I think we discussed, I had a really good discussion, it's up in the podcast that's released today, is a really good discussion about feminism and the Gnostic Mass, for example, where I think a lot of people describe the priestess as a vessel and passive, and how that has to be like that because of the balance of things, etc., etc. And I think that's actually really unfair to the priestess role, because you're the one who comes in, especially in the Gnostic Mass. The priestess comes in and she goes, I am earth and I am heaven, and I send you my greeting. And now I'm gonna make you a guy who's going to be able to to transfer the mysteries to you. And so she's actually the prime mover in the whole thing. It's not the priest. The priest shows up and goes, oh great, now let's worship you because you created us all. And I think that's really important to bring out in the occult sort of discussion.
Yeah. And to look at, while that example of the birds is one thing, but there's a lot of other examples. There's there's seahorses too, where the man carries the baby. There's there's examples where the lioness does the hunting and the man stays home. And
lies in the tree and sulks.
Yeah, exactly. And so people with a bias toward wanting things to be like Norman Rockwell in the 50s or something will look at a particular kind of relationship in nature and say, see, it's natural. But it's not necessarily. And there's not...
And also,
I'm sorry, what?
No, I also think that we have to transcend that. If we're to go anywhere and, obtain this unity with ourselves and the universe and everything, then we have to transcend base animal instincts.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that's what the whole refining process, that's the whole alchemical process is all about. And that's what the whole Kabbalistic process is about ascending into this higher consciousness where things like gender is nothing.
Right. Yeah.
Because all is one and one is all.
Yeah. And where race, gender, sexual orientation, and all of these things can be part of the diversity that we all share, and the individual expression of divinity as a human being in a particular way. Like I'm a big fan of the Vulcan religion and Sarek in Star Trek. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations is their main.
Vulcans are cool.
Yeah.
Vulcans are really cool.
They're logical.
And I think that's it's just it's such a forgotten. I think we're so busy in trying to be these children of the new aeon and trying to find ourselves that we forget to look at the macrocosm, and back again to this whole getting lost in the abyss, etc.
Or lost in symbols. Like if you have a particular, like for example, if you're looking at, Hermetic Kabbalah, and then you say, okay, well, father, mother, son, daughter. Okay, well, in this ritual, you're going to be the daughter, so you represent Malkut, and you're the vessel, and you're going to receive from the rest of the tree. Okay, and you're the mother, so you're going to receive from the father, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, that's neat and all, but it's like there's more than one way to look at things. And, if you ask the Japanese whether the son is male or female, they'll say that's the great mother. That's, and so, I mean, for example, in Northern Europe, for the Vikings, the sun was Sunna, where we get the name sun, and she rode in a chariot of fire through the cloudy sky that was always cloudy, and she was a healer.
I can guarantee that it's always cloudy.
Yeah, and she was a healer. She was a healer goddess, or vulva. That's the word for healer, if you're female. Yeah. And then if you go down to Egypt, where it's fucking hot, and you ask them about the sun, they'll say that's the angry god Ra. Maybe not these days, but But yeah, it's just a different way of looking at things depending on your point of view.
So what we come back to is that now we're kind of past those, paradigms in some way. It's very postmodern if we look at it from a cultural history perspective. That we are totally transcending that, and so we need to sort of make the steps to make it so. especially in such young movements such as Thelema, I think. Oh, I was saying to the sister I interviewed in Canada yesterday. It's like I wish we had salons for these kind of things, where we could just sit and hang out and talk about these things and really get to depth with it, because I think we also isolate ourselves too much.
Right. We're scattered around the globe, so I mean, we can get online and feel
also,
like there's many of us, but it's hard to find a place to hang out with other people who will want to talk about this. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's true. If we look at, for example, the Romantic poets, they got awfully boring in the end, because all they did was hang out and drink coffee and swear at each other. And,
hence the anti-transcendentalists. And Thelemites, depending on the subject.
Yeah. I have to tell you a really funny anecdote, by the way, and this has nothing to do with esotericism or anything, but speaking of the New Romantics, we were talking about getting a pet here in my house, and I was like, well, can't have cats because our son has asthma, and dogs, we live in a flat, so we can't really have a dog. We wanted to roam and stuff, so I was like, well, what can we get then? Well, we could get fish, and then we came up to, what should we name it? And I said, well, I've had cats and I've named them after gods and goddesses. I've had a dog and I named him after a bishop, after sci-fi, alien. And then he said, so what should we call the fish? Now, we could call him after authors. And I go, Byron, he could be Byron. My husband went, no, he could be Shelley. And I just laughed because Shelley drowned off the coast of Italy. I was like, that's a little bit sad. Let's not name our fish Shelley. That would be very unfortunate. Sorry,
come across as
fucking horrible intellectual wank joke, but it was, yeah.
Although it has been over 100 years, so technically it is funny.
Yeah, it is funny. Time has passed. We can laugh about it now. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think, I mean, at least here in Sweden, it's the cult community is quite closed and quite separate, and it's been hard to sort of weasel people out of the darkness that is their own living rooms and actually activate people.
Right.
Because people get so lost in this journey of themselves. So that's my other sort of...
Because it's too cold out?
It is too cold out, but it's warm and nice inside, and you get free heating when you rent a space, so you just turn it up.
Yeah.
But no, I think we could really do with more community, and that's also why I wanted to start the podcast, because I barely hear from other women that are occultists.
Yeah. Well, this will be good, because now, if any women are out listening to this, especially if they're in Sweden, I'll have a link to your site. Do you want to let people know your earthly name as well?
Yeah, so I'm Ella Jensen. That's my earthly name. Gosh. But you can find us at stoopingstarlight.com, and really, even men can get in touch. We're not, you can tell us things. I think it's really important as well that men listen, because I think if it was only for women and only women listen, then the whole point.
That's true.
That's great.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for speaking to me on the Esoterinerds podcast.
It's great. It's great talking to you. It's
Likewise.
Really awesome. Finally get a voice to the face.
Yeah, we should do this again soon.
We should. We really should.
And I will keep an ear out in my community for prominent female Thelemites who might make good guests on your podcast.
And likewise, but I'll keep an eye out for both.
Yeah, any kind of Esoterinerds.
Yeah, I know a few.
Cool.
But yeah,
Excellent.
I'll work them out of the woodwork for you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll talk again soon, and sleep well.
Yeah, take care. Have a good afternoon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ella. It was very nice meeting you. Special thanks to my cat Masha for providing the meowing in the background right now. Special thanks to Camille and Kennerly for the harp transitions. Special thanks to the monks at Mount Koyasan, the intro and the outro. I'll talk to you next time. Namaste. Good night.